left brain, right brain, which you've talked about a couple of times before. But it was basically, I got asked by somebody about it, and I thought you've talked about it to me quite a bit, and I thought I had a fairly decent grasp of the fact that language is left, right. And there was, I think, basically you mentioned one other that was significantly left, right, and then everything else is basically noise. Was that correct?
Just a little bit more than noise, but this is from Norman Geschwin's lecture at Harvard. We used to go to his lectures because he was such a brilliant lecturer. He was a neurologist at Harvard, and he had introduced the English-speaking world to the old German neurology, which had made very great strides around the turn of last century, and that is end of the 1800s, beginning of 20th century. And he introduced the English-speaking world, so there was a lot of stuff that they had missed because it was in German. Okay, anyway, he was a brilliant lecturer, a great raconteur, Norman Geschwin. So we went to his lectures, and one of his lectures was on left brain, right brain. And so he said, which was at the time a very hot topic, everybody was talking, everything was left brain, right brain. So he said, okay, here is the story about left and right brain, he said. The first thing is, language is unequivocally and robustly lateralized, in the sense that in most right-handed people, it's on the left hemisphere specialization. If you get a damage to the left hemisphere in such a person, their language capacity is devastated, and if the same person had the lesion on the right side in the same place, it would have been minimally disturbed. Okay, so highly lateralized, highly specialized left-right. Some people have a more diffuse distribution on both sides, and some have a right hemisphere specialization. But for most people, most right-handed people, it's heavily left lateralized. So that is an undoubted and robust and reliable function, important function that is heavily lateralized. It says, after that, less clearly lateralized, but still substantial and robust, is handedness, whether you're left or right-handed. Okay? Most people are born right-handed, and some are born left-handed, and so next under language comes handedness, and he says that's the only additional one that is robustly and unequivocally lateralized. Beneath handedness, and usually a long way beneath handedness, comes a plethora of other functions, which, if you study them assiduously enough with enough subjects, you will get the statistically significant lateralization. But it's small. It's a small difference between left and right. And if you run enough subjects, you add a few more, you'll get statistical significance. But it's not this unequivocal, robust, undoubted, rock-bottom solid lateralization as language and handedness. So those are all, they are not bluffs, they are not hoaxes, they are there, they are small effects with statistical significance, but for practical purposes, not all that great, not worth writing home about. And of course, there was a whole industry of these because of the fame of language lateralization, because that was such a big thing and such a big discovery, which was an old discovery, of course, by Broca, because of the prestige of that lateralization, everybody else wanted to find something lateralized attributed to them. So the whole industry was grinding out studies in the 60s, 70s, 80s, up into the 90s on hemispheric specialization of this function, that function, this function, that function, all over the place. And you will find some difference, but it's not all that great.
Is it like a variation between people, between subjects, where some people have a slight lateralization, or is it that there is a general slight lateralization over everybody?
It could be both. The point he was making is that the difference in the function is small.
Yeah. Okay.
It's represented on both sides, and a little more on one side than on the other. Now, this could be individually, or it could be a group effect. But the basic point was the difference is small. It's not a thing. It's not a thing where you won't find that function on the other side.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not significant. It's the lack of understanding of effect size again.
Yeah. Its effect size was when was just not on the horizon in the excitement about it. And that, of course, was so easy to popularize. And you got manuals for teaching drawing by beaming to the right brain and all of these things, Anyway, I went to one of those book fairs, and there were sections upon sections of right brain pedagogy. It was a pedagogy fair. Okay? You can't imagine. And I went and I just looked and I said, it was, a whole industry with book after book of how to address in effective pedagogy the right brain.
The creative right brain, the cynical left brain.
Holistic, creative, inclusive right brain, and then the linear, imperialistic, logic-ridden, terrible left brain.
Yeah. Okay, that was exactly what I had remembered. It's good to know.
Well, yeah. So it's language, handedness, and then a whole bunch of other stuff, which is there. I mean, there are presumably reasons. Once you have one thing that is heavily lateralized, a lot of other things are going to be pushed around. It's almost inevitable, and particularly when language, which is our main medium of communication, if that's heavily lateralized, when we communicate, when we talk, I mean, so much information comes into our brain by what we hear other people say. It's inevitably going to cover things. And the very fact that space is allocated disproportionately on the left side to language means that some other things are going to have less space. Okay, it's an inevitable consequence of the way once you have one very lateralized function, others are going to be affected, but not for intrinsic reasons. And people are still making theories about why is language lateralized. And there is lateralization in animals with not a whiff of language at all. So there are some brain structures like the habenula that are naturally a little lopsided, a little bigger on one side than the other, and so on. So there's plenty of grist for speculating on where does it come from. Maybe it started as a fluke and got lateralized, or there is a very fundamental reason for it.
Is it linked to the torsional twist of the brain itself, that it's like the...
I'm sure there's some people have tried to follow that, and planum temporale on the temporal lobe and so on, and being bigger on one side and the other. And one of the proposals, of course, is that if you want something to be a center of control, like let's say executive control, steered by language, you might want to have it single.
Mm.
Instead of having to fight it out between two-sided control, why not leave it on one side, let that one decide, and then everything else follows? Because it's going to have to come to a decision sooner or later anyway. So that would imply, because language is the pinnacle, to use E.O. Wilson's pinnacle metaphor, because language is the pinnacle of lateralization. It may mean that in us, when we are obviously dominated by language, and so much of our interactions are in linguistic terms, that to leave that as the decision nexus at the same time makes sense.
Yeah, and I guess it's like a classification issue where, I mean, it doesn't matter if you have dancing and it's bilateral, it doesn't make a big difference. But if you have to select a word, you can't have a runoff with two incorrect choices.
Exactly. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.